My name is Fatima Sumar, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for International Development here at Harvard University. On behalf of CID and the Lakshmi Mittal and Family South Asia Institute at Harvard University, I want to welcome you to today's conversation with President Ranil Wickremesinghe, live from Sri Lanka. Mr. President, thank you for being here with us. The Mittal Institute engages in interdisciplinary research to advance and deepen the understanding of critical issues in South Asia and its relationship with the world. The Center for International Development works across Harvard University and a global network of researchers and practitioners to build, convene, and deploy talent to address the world's pressing challenges. Today's event originated from a discussion with Harvard students and alumni. As research centers at Harvard who work on complex and difficult issues, we believe robust dialogue is critical to understanding all nuances of the current situation in Sri Lanka. We want to acknowledge that people have strong views, emotions, and feelings about what is happening in Sri Lanka and of today's event itself, and that what has happened in the country during and after the Civil War is deeply personal to many Sri Lankans, including those who are part of our Harvard community. Harvard University is committed to open debate and discussion, which are essential to improving public policy and public policy leadership. Harvard acknowledges the rights of our community members to non-disruptive protests and to express dissent, as well as the rights to access and participate in discussions and events without impediment. We also acknowledge that speakers should have the chance to present their views and to be heard by those who wish to hear them. We expect speakers to take questions from the audience, and thank you for helping us follow decorum to have the most constructive dialogue today. Sri Lanka is at a pivotal moment in its history. The island nation is facing its worst ever economic crisis since it gained independence in 1948. Since 2019, Sri Lankans have faced significant shortages of food, medicine, and fuel, as well as skyrocketing inflation. The economic crisis is estimated to have doubled the poverty rate between 2021 and 2022, increasing the number of poor people by 2.7 million. The news this week of the International Monetary Fund deal raises both hope and questions on the economic trajectory of the country and the reforms ahead. Tough issues remain to be resolved on democratic governance, reconciliation, the postponement of local elections, and the right to peaceful protest, among several civil liberties and human rights. Ranil Wickremesinghe was sworn in as the President of Sri Lanka on the 21st of July, 2022. He has been the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka on 6 occasions. He is the leader of the United National Party, Sri Lanka's oldest political party, founded in 1946, and he has served in all parliaments since 1977. President Wickremesinghe was elected president by parliamentary vote after the People's Movement, Aragalaya, or struggle, toppled the serving president. Since taking office last year, he has voiced his commitment to restoring economic and political stability to his country. The future of Sri Lanka has important implications not only for the region, but globally as well. In the United States, we are commemorating the 75th anniversary of bilateral relations this year. Today's run of show will include a 15-minute address from the president, followed by a discussion with our moderators. Professors Tarun Khanna and Asim Khwaja are both distinguished economists and the respected heads of our centers. They will come to the stage at the 15-minute mark to lead a moderated discussion. Following this dialogue, and in keeping with Harvard tradition, the president will then welcome questions from the audience. Mr. President, thank you for joining us here at Harvard today for this important dialogue. Let me also acknowledge in our audience the presence of Mahinda Samarasinghe, Sri Lanka's ambassador to the United States. Mr. President, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished guests and friends. First, I must thank Professor Tarun Khanna and Professor Asim Khwaja for inviting me to join this conversation with you researchers on Sri Lanka and what's happening there. As you pointed out, the Lakshmi Mittal at the Family South Asian Institute has certainly brought South Asia into focus, ably assisted by your Center for International Development. To save time, let's start at what happened at the time I took over as president. I became the president of the country amidst the worst economic and political crisis in the 200 years of its modernity. As you said, poverty had doubled to 25% of the population, 500,000 lost their jobs. The nation's revenue as a percentage of the GDP, 12.5 in 2018 to 8.2 in 2022. It was insufficient to meet the vital needs of debt servicing, salaries, and social protection. The public debt increased to 11% of the GDP. As Sri Lanka moved towards the abyss of economic obliteration, chaos erupted. My predecessor was forced to leave the country and resign. The President's house, the President's office, the official residence of the Prime Minister, office of the Prime Minister were all occupied by protesters. My private residence and library were set on fire. Attempts to occupy Parliament and force the members of Parliament out were prevented by the timely arrival of the army. When I took over, our foreign reserves were down. There was no money in the treasury. I used to get up every morning, go into office and meet with the officials to see where we could find an extra 100 million rupees, an extra 200 million rupees. The foreign reserves are such, there were few days in which we had no foreign reserves. I had $2,000 at home. Therefore, once in my life, I was richer than the state. So my first task, therefore, was to arrive at a staff level agreement with IMF. It required price adjustments, a difficult decision to make, but there were no options. Then came the IMF Extended Fund Facility arrangement approved by the IMF board on 20th March. It's broadly a 4-year program of fiscal consolidation from 2023 to 2026. It will also address the twin imbalances of Sri Lanka's economy, the fiscal deficit and the balance of payment deficit. We agreed on an ambitious program to restore macroeconomic stability and debt restructuring to achieve economic sustainability. The program will raise Sri Lanka's revenue to 15% of the GDP by 2026, improve debt management and control public expenditure. This will make available much needed financial resources for education and healthcare, as well as allowing the expansion of the social safety net and the restoration of price stability. More than the $3 billion that we received from the facility, the value of IMF support is far greater. The credibility that is attached to the IMF program helps unlock other sources of financing from development partners and the global market in general. Such financing is essential to build Sri Lanka's foreign reserve. Restoring external financing of our budget will also reduce the need for monetary financing by the central bank. Alongside negotiating for the IMF facility, Sri Lanka has embarked on efforts to restructure its debt. Precise negotiations with creditors on the modalities of restructuring debts will commence now. In reorganizing debt, Sri Lanka will ensure that the stability and integrity of its financial system remains robust and unhindered. All these measures will stabilize the economy by 2026 at the latest. However, this alone is not sufficient. High growth has eluded Sri Lanka in the last few decades. Unlike the southeastern nations, we have not been able to seize the opportunities and possibilities arising from the fast-changing global economic situation. This program then is a defining moment. The current structural reforms will release Sri Lanka's growth potential by enhancing competition, promoting trade liberalization, remove impediments to private investments, and implementing climate change. A program to put us onto a high growth trajectory. It is my belief that the success and the sustainability of this reform will depend on a new political framework which addresses the requirements of the commitment to reconciliation amongst the major ethnic groups in the country, leading to a truly collective Sri Lankan identity. Politically settling the bristling issues pertaining to the ethnic groups in the country is a sine qua non for sustainable and lasting development. I have been talking with the Tamil members of parliament, both in the government and the opposition, to tackle the unresolved issues regarding national reconciliation. The expedient tracing of Tamils missing in action. This is an urgent measure. The issue of Tamil prisoners who were involved in terrorist activities, the release regarding them, operationalizing the National Lands Commission under the Constitution, return of the lands in the north and east, settling the latent issues of the devolution of political powers and the implementation of the Presidential Commission report on the violation of human rights, to name a few. In addition, legislation is being prepared for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission alongside a new law to replace the existing Prevention of Terrorism Act. I will be continuing discussions, this time not only with the Tamil members of parliament, but also with other Tamil groups, including the diaspora, and we are setting up a separate diaspora office to liaise with the Tamil diaspora community. I want everyone to be involved in this effort. 2, the commitment to equity, equality, inclusivity, diversity, and the genuine empowerment of women. Sri Lanka is in the process of fulfilling its long overdue commitment to the UN Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against the Women by drafting pieces of legislation, the Gender Equality Act, the Women's Empowerment Act, and the National Commission on Women Act. The Cabinet has already approved the National Policy on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, as well as the Women's Peace and Security Action Plan. Third, youth representation and the Youth Parliament. The youth have been calling for a genuine system change. I will be appointing a Presidential Commission on Political Parties. We have already made provision for youth representatives to sit on the oversight committees of Parliament. Fourthly, responding to the challenge of climate change. Bringing in the climate change legislation and Living Entities Act to take in 5 areas of Sri Lanka, the protection of the famous Muthurajawala swamp land, and of course the establishment of a climate change university, the first of its kind to serve the whole Indian Ocean region. And finally, addressing social issues. We are calling for a social contract among all different economic partners, workers, farmers, businessmen, so that we all benefit from the growth agenda. It's not a question of few benefiting and others losing out. There will also be a social justice commission to inquire into areas which require remedies by the state. Looking beyond short-term debt restructuring strategy and imbalances, we need to take this crunch as an opportunity to transform our economy to face the complex and multifaceted demands of the mid-21st century, forged by mass globalization, massive digitalization, high-tech multiplicity of information, automation, impending artificial intelligence, climate change, and ecological responsiveness. Fresh understanding of plurality, diversity, and inclusivity, as well as the instabilities of the post-modern condition. This requires a new economic model founded on a highly competitive, export-oriented economy, an environment-friendly green and blue economy, and a digital economy. Professor Ricardo Hausmann, who is from Harvard, has already been doing work on the competitiveness of the Sri Lankan economy, and we will be carrying forward that work, and I hope that he will be in Sri Lanka very soon. The restructuring and the region of Sri Lanka's economy over the next 25 years is expected to bring about a high growth trajectory in the medium term and to meet the following long-term goals. High economic growth of 7 to 8%. This is possible. We had it once for a short period. Increase international trade by more than 100% of the GDP. Annual growth of US $3 billion from new exports going up to the next 10 years. And also for the next 10 years, annually attracting $3 billion of investment. An internationally competitive workforce with market responsive skills coming about in the next 10 years, which will also require changes in our vocational and university education. And we will build on our natural advantages. Firstly, the modernization of agriculture and the fisheries sector. Then to make Sri Lanka a regional logistics center. We will build up diversity in tourism, not merely the traditional tourists who come into Sri Lanka. We will explore Sri Lanka's potential for green hydrogen, and by digitalizing the economy and introducing automation, we aim to leapfrog into Industry 4 for our manufacturing and services. That's a 10-year span, not a 2-year span. As I said before, this is an ambitious program for 25 years that will make Sri Lanka a high middle income country when it reaches its century of independence from colonial rule in 2048. This is not impossible. From 1977, in 10 years, we carried out a massive land development and reservoir program, which originally was to take 30 years. We've opened up in that period a number of free trade zones. We've established a large number of factories for exports. It is a question of the will to repeat this by going in to further economic reforms. If we are to do so, we also have to make use of our location in the region. To do so, our strategic location being an advantage, we also have to face two immediate problems. Firstly, the lack of economic integration in South Asia. Apart from a few lukewarm efforts, there has been no sincere political will to amalgamate the region's economies into a powerful trading bloc. And it is further complicated by the flagging Indo-Pakistan relations. To move forward then, Sri Lanka needs trade integration with many of its neighboring countries. Firstly, we will upgrade the free trade agreement with India to an economic cooperation and technical agreement. This is essential. India is going to be the next growth center, and it will trigger off growth in South Asia. We are just 22 miles away, and we have to work especially to ensure that the synergies of Sri Lanka and Tamil Nadu are brought together. Secondly, we'd like to come to an agreement with the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the Asia's largest trade bloc, because that will bring us to make the largest trade bloc in the world. And finally, as we go along, we would also like to join the comprehensive, progressive trade agreement. With this, Sri Lanka will be integrated with the three largest trade blocs: India, RCEP, and the CPTPP. This exercise will also determine the level of competitiveness and thereby provide the vital push for growth. The other sticky issue that we need to make into account is the smoldering big power rivalry in the Indian Ocean. While our islands has always maintained its political independence, India is regarded as the net security provider in the region and is Sri Lanka's closest neighbor and the country with we have the longest ties. Sri Lanka is also a member of the Belt and Road Initiative. However, the presence of the Chinese Sea Fleet ships and the formation of the Quad, the security dialogue between Australia, India, Japan and US have complicated peace and security in the Indian Ocean. We have close ties with all the members of the Quad as well as China. The rising level of competition between China and the Quad has further been aggravated by the newly formed AUKUS, with a pact between Australia, United States and United Kingdom. Sri Lanka accepts the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific territories. We regard the Indo-Pacific as consisting of two distinct oceans. Our country is committed to the freedom of navigation and the security of undersea cables in the Indian Ocean. Therefore, it is essential for Sri Lanka's future to ensure that the issues of the Asia-Pacific, especially that of Taiwan, does not spill over into the Indian Ocean. Sri Lanka's access to the growing Asian markets as well as the opening of African markets cannot be disrupted and should not be disrupted by big power rivalry or conflict. So this is the story of a country, a small country, but a country with a strong democratic tradition, with an open economy, which has been non-aligned, of rising out of the ashes of its old economy to build a new economy, going hand in hand with the developments in the Asian region and the Indian Ocean. So that's our future. It may be a difficult task, but it is not an impossible task. We have to apply ourselves, and we are confident that with the rest of the Indian Ocean countries and South Asia, we will grow in the next 25 years. So I must thank you for having invited me, and I hope that I kept the time limit and I'll be able to complete this before my 15 minutes was up. Thank you, Taru.